Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Sarah Sandberg and I'm going to be your host for our session today. This webinar is focused on branded communities for success in today's social landscape. We are thrilled to have Nate Elliott here with us, VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, as our guest speaker. Before I get to Nate and his presentation, there's just a couple of housekeeping tasks I want to go over. This webinar is being recorded, and participants will receive a link to the recording after the session concludes. As we go along, please submit any questions you might have into the Q&A panel, and we're going to get to as many of those as we can during our QA time at the end. After a brief introduction about myself and a little bit more about us at Passenger, I'm going to turn it over to Nate to share some of the factors changing the ways that marketers and advertisers interact and engage with customers and clients. All right, here's a little bit about me as your host. I'm responsible for our client services department here at Passenger, and it is my pleasure to work with clients from all different industries to create compelling community experiences that put the voice of the customer at the center of their decision business making. I've been with Passenger for 4 years, and in that time I've had a front row seat to seeing our clients achieve their goals through community. Across industries and among consumer and B2B audiences, private online communities have helped companies deal with several transformative trends, which we will get to in just a couple of slides. Marketers and advertisers are faced with a new day and age when it comes to engaging customers and clients' customers. Here at Passenger, we offer innovative online community engagement software that helps companies interact with their customers in order to make better business decisions. In its simplest form, we provide the technology platform and strategic guidance to help you build relationships with your key stakeholders. Last year, we debuted our new state-of-the-art Fuel platform designed to allow you to easily uncover insights as well as foster innovation and inspire advocacy. One very exciting note I have to mention, if you are eager to take a look at our Fuel platform, you can actually start your very own trial by visiting our brand new microsite, fuelcycle.com. I mentioned that we are in a new day and age. Marketers and advertisers are faced with transformative trends they've never been faced with before. First, it's the age of the empowered customer. Brands are no longer in control of the conversations about their products and services. Now customers are driving those conversations, and a big reason for that is the rise in online usage, which leads me to the second point. Customers are more connected than ever. Recent studies have shown us that brand loyalty is low, but communication about brands and products is ever increasing. Because there's so much chatter happening online, it's becoming increasingly important to have an active voice in the conversations your customers are having. And here's just a couple stats to drive that point home. 79% of customers spend over half their total shopping time researching products online. 53% of customers abandon an in-store purchase due to a negative online sentiment. Our last main trend is that technology is evolving rapidly. The ways customers access and share information is moving forward at a rapid pace, and brands must be prepared for what's next. And this is the perfect time to bring in our guest speaker, Nate. We started working with Forrester in January, and we are thrilled to be able to come together for this presentation today. Nate has done a tremendous amount of research about digital marketing and engagement, and as many of you probably know, they also have a lot of research about online communities. Nate is going to share with you his perspective given some of their research to date, and then in parallel, I'm going to share some examples of clients who are leveraging communities today. That way, as you think about your own business, you can gain a bit of insight and inspiration. 2016 planning is upon us, and hopefully what we'll share will spark new ideas for how your brand can leverage engagement for more insights, advocacy, loyalty, and sales. And with that, I would like to welcome Nate Elliott and hand the presentation over to him. Nate, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about you and your work?
Sure thing, and thanks very much for having me today. I really appreciate the chance to be on this webinar. My name is Nate Elliott. I'm a Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, and at Forrester I lead our coverage of social media marketing. So at Forrester, when we talk about social, we talk about all the different kinds of social, whether it's social media on a big social network like Facebook and Twitter, whether it's using word of mouth, or it's of course using branded communities. And what I wanted to do today was share with you guys some of our thinking on how communities in particular can help marketers and brands and companies drive more success than they've ever seen before. And I want to start with a statement that isn't going to surprise many of you. And really what I want to do is talk about some of the challenges of social marketing before we get into this topic of how communities can solve those challenges of social marketing. But here's the thing. When we start to look at what's working and what's not working in social media, what we see is that social media is bigger than ever before. And again, this isn't going to surprise most of the people on the phone, but I want to take a minute to just focus in on some of these numbers, because when you step back and look at how far we've come in just the past 5 or 10 years in terms of companies using social media, some of the data really is staggering. We're at a point right now where in the United States, by the end of this year, about 80% of the entire online population of the United States will use social media. That is absolutely astounding. You only have to go back 6 or 7 years to get to the point where less than a quarter of the U.S. online population was using social media. So from about 25% in 2008 all the way up to about 80% by the end of 2015 is absolutely phenomenal growth. And of course, we know that it's driven by a lot of different forces. The big social networks are doing incredibly well. Facebook now serves more than 50% of the entire world online population. Instagram announced recently that they've reached more than 400 million users. But it's not just the big social networks that are driving this growth. When we look at our data, what we're seeing is phenomenal numbers of users who are engaging in other social channels as well, engaging in blogs and communities, using ratings and review sites, going to brands' own websites and engaging with communities and discussions there. There are so many different ways that companies can use social media to reach consumers, because quite simply there are so many different ways that our consumers, that our audiences are using social media, and this growth has been absolutely phenomenal over the past few years. Little surprise then that with this kind of growth in social adoption, the growth in marketer usage of social has been rapid as well. And we believe that at the end of 2015, when we count up the numbers, that U.S. marketers alone will have spent $9.7 billion. That's billion with a B. Almost $10 billion this year in the U.S. alone will be spent by marketers on social media. Never mind what's being spent in Canada and Western Europe and Eastern Europe, in Asia and Pacific and all the other parts of the country, of the world. Billions and billions more spent on social media. And you can see that those numbers will continue to grow pretty aggressively over the next several years as well. So it really is bigger than ever before. When we stop and appreciate the numbers and where we've come from in terms of companies and marketers using social media, when we see where we are today, the numbers are bigger than many of us ever thought that they would be. And that's fantastic news for social. But there's a problem here, which is that marketers still can't prove that most of this stuff is working, despite the fact that 80% of our population is now using social media, despite the fact that nearly every company and every marketer is using social. We're going to spend $10 billion on social just in the U.S. this year. Despite all of this phenomenal growth, this incredible scale, most marketers still cannot prove that social media is driving value for their business. And here's the thing. I've been working at Forrester for 12.5 years. I've been covering social media as an analyst for well over a decade now, and in every survey I've ever run as an analyst, when we ask marketers what their biggest challenge is with social media, we get the same response every single time. They say that measuring the performance of social programs is their biggest challenge. And it doesn't matter if we ask marketers in the U.S. or in other countries. It doesn't matter if we ask about word of mouth or communities or ratings and reviews or any other type of social media. Every single time I've ever asked this question, marketers have said that measurement is their biggest challenge. In fact, this year, 53% of marketers said that measurement was the biggest challenge. And that gap of 15% to the next biggest challenge is, I think, the biggest I can ever recall seeing. So I know we have a poll, and Kelly, if you can put the poll on the screen right now, what we want to do is just get perspective of the people on the phone right now. What do you guys think is the biggest challenge in social media, or rather, do you agree that measuring the performance of social is the biggest challenge for your company? You can see a range of options there from strongly agree down to strongly disagree, and we'll give you a few seconds right now to fill out that poll. So you can see 49% of the folks on the phone right now strongly agree with that statement as well. Another 37% agree. I'm really jealous of the one person on the phone who strongly disagrees that measurement is their biggest challenge. Give me a call afterwards. I'd love to hear what your challenges actually are and hear what you're doing well on measurement. As an aside, I put out a new report on measurement just this morning, and this really is such an enormous challenge for marketers, as you continue to see. And here's the thing, when we fail to measure social appropriately, all sorts of bad things happen. When we find that we can't measure the impact of what's happening in social media, we run into a number of different problems. One is that we can't test and learn and optimize. We can't get better at what we're doing as marketers and as companies when using social media. But there's another really important challenge as well, which is when we can't prove that what we're doing works as marketers in social media, our bosses start to lose faith. Right? And when we can't prove that this is effective as a marketing channel, the people who are actually signing the checks, people who are hiring us, start to lose faith in social as a channel. And that's what's happening right now. Earlier this year, we ran a survey, and we talked to what we call avid social marketers. These are some of the most excited, active, and positive social marketers we could find. These are folks who use social a lot and who are very satisfied overall with the social media that they're using. But what we did was we asked them about whether different kinds of social media and social channels were driving business value. And we segmented their responses by what we call social practitioners. These are the guys who are using social every day. They've got their hands on the knobs for these social tools. And then we also looked at social managers. Now, these aren't necessarily folks who work in the social department. These are the managers of the social people, if that makes sense. What we're looking at here really is a group of senior marketers who oversee social programs but don't actually execute those social programs themselves. So these are marketers who are our bosses, if you're like me, if you're a social marketer. These are folks who also have visibility into and usually control over other kinds of marketing, like search marketing or display advertising online. And when we look at the responses of these different audiences in terms of whether social drives business value, the gaps are absolutely enormous. You can see that 52% of social practitioners would give organic posts to their Facebook page a 5 out of 5 for driving business value. I think that's pretty optimistic anyway, but what's even more notable is that only about half as many of their bosses are willing to agree with that statement. If you go further down, ads or promoted tweets on Twitter, 41% of social practitioners would give that a 5 out of 5 for business value, only 13% of their bosses. The bosses here are less than 1/3 as likely as the practitioners to agree that Twitter is driving strong business value for organizations. We see the gaps in these social tactics on big social networks. To be fair, we see them through most of the social ecosystem. When we can't prove what we're doing in social, when measurement is our biggest challenge and has always been our biggest challenge, this is one of the key problems you run into. We have to keep proving over and over again that social can drive value if we're going to keep getting that budget, if we're going to grow that $10 billion into 2016 and 2019, if we're going to keep our bosses on side and believing that we're driving value, we have to do a better job of measuring. We also have to bring them case studies and examples that show how social media can drive business objectives, not just social objectives. So actually, before we move on to the next part, we have another poll here as well. So Kelly, if we can call that one up, get that on the screen for just a second. And what we want to ask is, again, on that last slide, we saw that the senior marketing executives are starting to lose faith in the value of social. We want to know if you agree with those marketing executives. If you strongly agree, then that means that you're really starting to question the value of social as well. If you strongly disagree, then that means that you are rock solid. You know that social can deliver value. So we'll give you a few seconds to answer that poll question as well. All right, so it's sort of a mixed bag on this one, and you guys are leaning more towards disagreeing with those executives. 48% of the respondents we got here either somewhat or strongly disagree. That means 48% are still positive on the idea that social can deliver business value, but there's 27%, there's more than a quarter of our audience today who agrees that it's time to question the value of social. And this is the reality that we're facing. I got to say, I'm a social marketer. I'm a social analyst. I've been doing this for a long time. I believe that social can drive value, but I also question whether the way that we're using social as marketers is working. I question whether the practices employed by most marketers today when it comes to social media are actually effective, if they're actually driving value for organizations. And so what I want to do is talk about how we actually can show that social is driving value, and the key to that really is making sure that we're using social. In particular, we're going to talk about using brand communities to solve business challenges. We're going to make sure that we're looking at the ways social media and communities can drive real organizational value. And we're not talking about just driving engagement and likes and shares and usage. What we're talking about is driving the things that the CEO would know and appreciate and understand. The CMO would say, yeah, that's something that our marketing team has to do to make this company more successful. So we actually think that communities are a fantastic tool for doing this. And even when we look across the entire social spectrum, there are a lot of options here, right? We talked about some of them: ratings and reviews on your site, word of mouth, branded communities, Facebook, Twitter, and other social networks. When we look, though, at how much communities are used by brands and marketers versus how much value they deliver, we see a pretty enormous gap. And the data on this slide right now is one of the most frustrating things for me as a social analyst, because what we see on the left-hand side of the screen is that marketers still prefer to use the big, flashy, well-known public social networks, things like Facebook and Twitter. In fact, 95% of marketers in one recent survey that we ran said that they were actively marketing on Twitter. By comparison, marketers don't tend to use the kinds of social media that they think of as a little bit more established or not quite as young and sexy and new. And so that's how you wind up with relatively lower numbers for things like word-of-mouth marketing and ratings and reviews. And in particular, only 48% of the companies we surveyed recently told us they were using branded communities or forums. What we're looking at here is that marketers are twice as likely to use Twitter as they are to use branded communities and forums. But when we then go back and ask marketers what's delivering value for you, they say consistently that branded communities are delivering significantly more value than things like Facebook and Twitter are. So this is why it's frustrating for me, because there's this fantastic opportunity. The marketers who are using branded communities, the companies who are using communities for all sorts of different purposes, are finding great value in using those communities, but yet this isn't where we're focusing our efforts in social media. We're still so enamored with things like Facebook and Twitter and the other big social sites. We at Forrester think it's time for marketers to double down on stuff that works, and communities work better than most of the other social channels that companies have access to. So what I want to do is bring you through a few of the ways that we think communities can deliver value for your organization. And before I do that, let me just hand it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Nate. So enlightening. I just want to add that when we talk about communities and the value they can deliver, there's a few areas of focus. At Passenger, we really see engagement as the social glue that is going to be universal in building out that relationship with customers. And when it's done well, the community initiative can yield great benefits to you as a brand. As we're going to go through in the next couple of slides, there are three main manifestations of community benefits, and they are insights, so brand learning about the customer, discovery and learning, where the customers are learning about the brand, and then loyalty and sales, which is the net desired effect of engagement.
Great, thanks very much. And I think some of the examples that I'll be presenting, some of the examples that Sarah's going to be presenting are going to talk about the way that communities can deliver on those benefits. And just to go through them one by one, one of the things that we think at Forrester communities can do incredibly well is that they can offer insights on your customers and what those customers might like in your products and your services. One of my personal favorite examples of this is from Barclaycard. Now this is, if you know Barclays, it's a UK based commercial bank, a consumer bank, and they also operate in the U.S. They have a product in the U.S. called the Barclaycard Ring card. It's a credit card, and what's interesting about Barclaycard Ring is they actually let the cardholders set the rules for the card. So when you are accepted to become a member of the Ring community, you get a credit card called Barclaycard Ring, but you also get access to the online community you see on the screen right now. And what they've been doing for the past 3 or 4 years now is letting customers actually set the rules in terms of what the interest rates will be, in terms of what the late fees will be, in terms of what kind of annual fees will exist, but also in terms of what benefits the card will carry, in terms of insurance, in terms of points and mileage accrual. They're letting their consumers make the decisions on what's going to be the most important stuff for them in the credit card. And by letting their audience set those rules, they're accomplishing a couple of different things. First and foremost, they're fundamentally gaining insights and understanding of what this audience wants, right? If you actually ask people what's going to be the most important balance to you between fees on the one hand and benefits and features on the other hand, you let them tell you this clearly, the community is going to speak up and they're going to give you the insight that you need to build a better card, not just for them, although we have seen that the insights community that they're running has reduced customer complaints by 50%. It's increased card retention versus other products by 25%. But Barclaycard can actually use this insight to generate better offers on some of the other credit products that they're bringing out to the marketplace as well. So a great example, Barclaycard Ring, of using a brand community to generate customer insights so they can build products that better meet their customers' needs.
I'd like to tell you the story about Hertz, who is a client of ours that uses insights to put their customers in the driver's seat of their brand. They came to us particularly wanting to increase insights among millennials. And with their community, they've been able to double the amount of insights they've gleaned from this critical demographic. They use those insights not just from the millennials, but really from all of those that participate in their community called the Hertz Hub, to gain information and feedback about their rental car fleet and services that they're offering. They actually just recently wrapped a stage-gate innovation project with their community members where they awarded the top 5 ideas that were submitted and voted on by the other members, and the brand is currently in the process of implementing the #1 community idea, which is pretty incredible to see that at play. And actually, perhaps just as importantly, they've been able to increase the overall amount of research that they've done, but been able to save thousands of dollars in the process of using community, which is a pretty tremendous return on investment.
Awesome. So again, 2 great examples of using communities to drive customer insights. But of course, that's not all that brand communities can do. One of the things that we love seeing brands use community for is to create reach and to drive discovery as well. You know, we talk about this idea at Forrester called the marketing radar, and the notion there is that there are all these things that brands and marketers have to do. But at the start of the customer journey, to get new customers aware of your products and services, to help them discover your products and services, you have to drive reach, and community actually can be a great tool for driving that kind of reach. You know, what we really see is there are all these different ways that people are discovering new brands and products and services. Seeing ads on TV is still a really big way that this happens. Doing online searches is still a really important way that this happens. But almost always when we run a survey like this, one of the top 3 ways that people are telling us they're discovering new brands and products and services is from people they know or through word of mouth. And that is where community can really do a great job of helping you drive discovery. If you build a community focused on driving word of mouth, then you can use it to create reach, drive discovery, build awareness for your products and your services. I have another UK-based example here, which is Marmite. And if anyone here doesn't know the product Marmite, I think you should count yourselves lucky. Marmite is a yeast extract spread that people put in thin layers on toast in some parts of the world, most especially in the UK. It is literally a smelly black goop that comes out of a jar, the same way jam or peanut butter would come out of a jar. And believe it or not, all up and down the island of Great Britain, people spread this on toast. And I personally don't think it's a very appealing food. It's one of those love it or hate it products. Some people love it. Some people, like me, won't actually ingest the stuff. But Unilever, which owns the brand, knew that it had a lot of very dedicated Marmite fans on its hand. And they knew that those Marmite fans might like it if they actually introduced a new extra strength version of Marmite called Marmite XO. And so they went out and they launched this extra strength version, and they decided for their launch plan, you know, they needed to get the word out about this, but they didn't want to spend a lot of money on above-the-line advertising. They didn't want to go into TV. They didn't want to spend on print or outdoor either. What they wanted to do was rely upon their existing loyal customers to get the word out. So Unilever actually created this exclusive online community for Marmite fans. They called it the Marmirati. It was an online community that had offline components as well. So to get into the Marmirati, you had to submit videos proving how crazy you were about Marmite as a product. And once you were in there, you got access to all sorts of facts and news and information. You got to get feedback on the marketing campaign. They really brought you in and made you part of this community as one of the Marmirati. They also threw parties and events in clubs around London and other parts of Britain that they had redesigned to look like 1890s sort of steampunk lounges. It was a very, very cool program that combined online community and offline efforts as well. And the whole idea here was that by inviting these loyal customers in the community, Unilever could actually get them to spread word of mouth and create the reach and the discovery and the awareness that the new product needs. In fact, they did. They generated more than $500,000 in sales in the first 6 months, which far exceeded Unilever's expectations. So one of my all-time favorite examples of a brand using community to drive awareness and discovery for one of their new products. Of course, that's a B2C example, but this works for B2B as well. And if you've never heard of a company called Bomgar, then that's not unusual, because this is what we call a remote support solutions provider. These are guys who do your customer service and your tech support for you from remote locations. It's not a very sexy industry category, but it's a very important category to the companies who need this kinds of services. But here's the thing, because it's not very sexy, people don't go online and talk about Bomgar and talk about remote support solutions. Having said that, the company knew it had lots of satisfied customers, and it wanted to use those customers to increase the amount of conversation people were having about the category and about their company specifically. So they built a community. They invited a couple hundred of their most loyal, most satisfied customers into the community. They called them all Bomgar Insiders, and they gave them lots of fun stuff to do around the company, but also just in general. You can see they're saying things like, help us celebrate the Beatles' 50th anniversary. That doesn't do much for actually promoting the brand, but it does keep people engaged with the community. And when you keep them engaged in the community, you can then ask them to do brand-related promotion as well. So, for instance, you can add Bomgar to your list of skills on LinkedIn. That's the kind of thing that increases the number of mentions of Bomgar online, that shows people that Bomgar is an important solution in this industry. And again, these guys were able to get so much new word of mouth. They more than doubled the online conversation about their brand. But more importantly, that awareness drove people to want to buy the products. And this was so successful that the Bomgar sales team actually had to ask the Bomgar marketing team to turn the program off for a little while. They were driving so many new qualified leads, the sales team couldn't keep up with it, which for me is probably the best endorsement I've ever seen of the value of a brand community for driving reach and driving word of mouth.
Thanks, Nate. I'm finding myself really grateful that this is the first I'd ever heard of Marmite, and I can imagine all of our participants going and Googling it after that description that you gave. Really powerful stuff. So our next case study example comes from the financial services space. And this is a really interesting use case for giving customers the ability to learn about your brand through a community. So at this particular client, they leveraged their community to invite merchants to come into the space and learn more about the offerings that the brand was providing for them. As part of this experience, members were able to interact with key stakeholders within the organization and learn more about the ways that the company was helping them do business better. During these educational activities, in addition, the brand was able to discover trends in the challenges that these merchants were facing. In many cases, these were challenges that they were not even aware existed. From the findings, the community was able, or the company, excuse me, was able to create new programs to drive innovation among the offerings that they were making available to their merchants. It's a great example of a brand finding a way to reach new customers, and then from that dialogue, create actionable product plans based on those findings.
Excellent. So we've seen now that communities are undervalued. We've seen that they can help drive insights for companies. We've seen that they can help drive new reach and awareness and discovery for companies as well. The third thing I want to talk about is how communities can support exploration and close sales. Because if you look at the customer journey, the customer life cycle, once someone has discovered your product or your service and they think, well, maybe that company can solve one of my needs, the next thing they do is they go and they explore your product in more detail. They want more information on the attributes and the specs of your product or your service. They want to hear more about how other customers have used your product or service to solve their needs. They want to do some research onto you as a company and whether you're the kind of company they want to do business with. There's all this stuff that they want to explore, and that's the kind of thing that can actually drive sales for an organization. And when we survey people and we say to them, where do you go to research brands and products or services? Well, here's the thing. They often start back at search engines, right? They're going to go and they're going to Google you. They're going to look you up on Bing. But once they do that, they're looking for sources of lots more information. That's what they want when they're exploring. And so they do things like visit the manufacturer or the brand website. They're coming to your site looking for more information on the products or the services that you have to offer to them. And you know, when we actually look at how that works for companies, There are so many great examples of companies and organizations using community on their own website to deliver the kind of detailed information that people are actually looking for. And let me just see if I can get to the right slide here, because I think we might have skipped a slide or two. Right. Great. So here we are. Constance Bank is a great example of this, of using community to get people the information that they need when they're doing research, when they're actually evaluating and considering the products that you have to offer. Now, Constance Bank is an online-only bank out of Germany, and if you know much about the banking industry, what you know is that people really love the service and the prices and rates that are offered by online-only banks. But those banks still have a pretty big challenge, which is if you've never walked down the street and seen a local bank branch, you might be a little bit nervous about giving them a bunch of your money to hold on to. Well, what we've seen from banks in the U.S. and Europe as well, and Constance Bank is a great example of this, is they solve that challenge by offering communities where people can go, or prospects can go, and ask questions to existing customers, where they can ask questions to employees or representatives of the bank itself. They can get information they need to learn more about the bank's services, but also to get a comfort level that they need to feel comfortable actually saying, I'm going to give you my life savings to hold on to for me now. By adding this community to its own website, Constance Bank was actually able to increase its conversion rates by 30% compared to before they had the community on their site. Sorry, this one seems a bit out of order, but let me see if I can find the example from Passenger here.
Thanks, Nate.
Yep.
So one of the clients, our clients that you may have read about recently, is the UPS store and their Small Biz Buzz community, as they were just featured in Forbes. And then here's a quote from Michelle Van Slyke, who's their Vice President of Marketing. When she talked about the importance of community and insights, she said, "We want to stay anchored in what's current and what's happening. One of the tools we use is called the Small Biz Buzz. We now have 350 small business owners on that site. At any given time, whatever decisions we're making, we can put it up in that environment and get an immediate reaction from our core customers. That helps us stay current and keep our business moving forward by having some really great insight." And I'm a big fan of that. We have had that now for about 2 years, and they are just outstanding small business owners. They provide immediate feedback. They've even done over 100 store visits for us recently, and things like that are so valuable. The UPS store uses their community for a number of things, but at the center of it is this. If they can find out what motivates small business owners to visit stores or visit the website, use their products and services, it equates to better sales and profits, which for them is the power of community. So Nate, I'm going to turn it back over to you to share some final thoughts. Make sure everyone gets your contact info. And then for all of you on the line, if you have questions and you haven't submitted them yet, we're getting close to the end of our presentation, so be sure to submit those and we will get to them in just a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And really just what I want to stress is there's so much potential in social. I mean, we asked that poll question earlier, and I was glad to see that people were disagreeing with the executives we survey, right? So many of the senior marketers we survey are starting to lose faith in social. I question whether the tactics we're using right now in social as an industry are the right ones because of stuff like the data we showed you, right? This notion that even though we know that communities drive more value for companies and being on Twitter does, the companies are still, despite that fact, twice as likely to use Twitter as they are to use communities. That tells me that it's not that social can't deliver business value. I mean, after all, 80% of online users are using social tools on a regular basis. We know there's enormous potential here. The problem is we've got to use the right tactics. We have to use the right tools. And we really believe at Forrester that communities are an incredibly important and valuable and effective social tool for companies in all sorts of different ways. We saw today how how companies can use social to drive insights about their customers, and that's going to help them build better products and services and ultimately drive more revenue. We saw how communities, especially communities that leverage things like your happiest existing customers, can drive new awareness and create new discovery and create more reach for your brand. We saw as well that communities can do things like take prospects and turn them into customers. They can take folks who want to know more about the products or the services you have to offer and help you close those sales. These are all incredible and valuable ways that community can help drive value for businesses beyond just counting likes and counting followers, the stuff that we tend to do in social media. This is what really social can deliver for us as organizations. So thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks so much to Sarah and Passenger for having me, and I'm looking forward to taking some questions.
You bet, Nate. It's been our pleasure. So before I get into peppering you with questions that have come in, I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap on some of the things that we've talked about today. So we've clearly covered that marketers and advertisers are increasingly faced with new challenges, and we really believe that communities are a powerful way to stay relevant in the face of these changes. Engagement inside the community can lead to 3 core results. The first of which is discovery, so understanding your brand or product today so that you can make actionable decisions on where the brand or product is headed or should be headed. Engagement with your customers in a private online community really can lead to game-changing discoveries. These discoveries can not only help you save time and money on research, but they can reveal insights into your customers' true motivations. They offer the ability to make more dynamic decisions and turn around valuable answers that will impact your brand in real time instead of waiting for weeks or more for traditional survey results. The second byproduct of engagement via community is innovation. Innovation and co-creation with your customers can help you build a roadmap for your brand or product's future. Your customers really are a great source for new ideas, and they can help narrow the broad set of ideas down to the most likely winners, like we saw with Hertz. An online community provides a forum that can inspire innovation from that fuzzy front end all the way to the back end of the innovation process. The community lets you use your trusted customer advisors to help accelerate that product development and your speed to the market. And the last one is advocacy. So people enjoy expressing their opinion about their favorite products and services. That we have seen clearly all over the online space. And your customers really can be your biggest asset when it comes to telling your brand story. But even your biggest fans do need some encouragement sometimes. Connecting with your customers, inspiring them to advocate through co-creating, and providing them exclusive information or experiences can develop those lifelong advocates that we're all looking for. All right, Nate, it has come time for some questions. Are you ready?
I'm always ready.
Okay, so if anyone has a question that they haven't submitted yet, we've got a little bit of time, so go ahead and submit that. But here's the first one that I have for you, Nate. What do you personally feel is the biggest challenge of social marketing, and where do you see the future of it headed?
Yeah. So, and again, every time I've asked marketers what they think the biggest challenge is, they talk about measurement, and I think that is a really, really important challenge. It's something that we absolutely have to solve as an industry. But I have to say, my impression of what the biggest challenge is a little bit different. I think in too many cases, social marketers are still attracted to shiny objects. And I get it. I understand. I mean, listen, I'm dying to see how Snapchat moves forward as an opportunity for brands and marketers. That's really interesting to me, and it's really exciting to me. I'm really fascinated by some of the changes that Instagram is introducing to its ad products as they launch into general availability this year. I understand shiny object syndrome because I have it sometimes myself as well. But we have to learn to better draw a line between these sort of shiny objects that catch our attention and our great cocktail party conversation and the things that we know can deliver value for the organization. And we have to actually start putting our resources, our human resources, our technology resources, and perhaps most importantly, our financial resources, into the social tools that we know can deliver value. I mean, I showed that slide earlier that says that even though marketers themselves say that brand communities are significantly more likely to drive value than being on Twitter is, that the marketers are still twice as likely to use Twitter as they are to build those brand communities. That is one of the most poignant examples from the survey data that we showed, but the fact is I could have pulled lots of different examples. Lots of the exciting, shiny objects out there in social are the ones that aren't delivering value. That's where we're putting our time and our effort and our money and our resources. And then the things that really can drive value, just because they're not as new or as sexy and they're not on the cover of, of the newspaper every day, we give them less attention, and we give them fewer resources. I think this is the challenge, right? We need to focus on the kinds of social that we know can work, that we know can drive value. And if we do that, right, if we just buckle down and say, we've got the data now, we've been doing this as an industry for a decade, we've got the data to know what works and what maybe doesn't work. Let's focus on the stuff that actually works. It's amazing that we have to say this out loud, but for me, that's the biggest challenge in social.
Nate, our next question that came in is about success measurement, which I don't think is any surprise since we saw some of those poll questions were a little bit polarizing. So this question is, when you say brand loyalty is low in terms of social engagement, how is that being measured? What data or research supports that?
So you cut out there a little bit in the question. Can you read it again?
Oh, sure, of course. So the question is, when you say brand loyalty is low in terms of social engagement, how is that measured? What data or research supports that?
I'm trying to remember exactly what data point the question's asking about, but when we talk about brand loyalty, we talk about social engagement. Here's the thing: people who engage with brands in social media, it sounds like it makes sense that those people are probably going to be loyal to the brand as well. But of course, that's not always the case, right? There are people who engage for negative reasons. Go to the Facebook page of any large consumer bank in the U.S., and you'll probably find that many of the engagements are messages of, well, hate's a strong word, but a lot of people aren't very fond of their banks, and so they spend a lot of time engaging with those banks in what probably isn't a very good and loyal way. Likewise, we know that many people engage with the content that marketers are putting out there just because the content itself is interesting, but that doesn't necessarily indicate that they're loyal to the brand. So, when we look at measuring engagement on big public social networks, we haven't seen a lot of correlation between that and customer loyalty and business value. The story is certainly a little bit different when we look at measuring engagement within communities, because we know that people spending time in communities does add up to positive business outcomes, and so the way that we tend to measure engagement in communities looks a lot more like, are they coming back, are they spending time, and that on average does turn into business value for companies. But we think that even in that case, engagement is really a stepping stone, and what you want to measure is a customer's loyalty to your company. Now, if it's a prospect, you're going to measure that with things like brand surveys. You're going to ask people about their awareness and their message association and their purchase intent. If they're an existing customer, with any luck, you can find out what their customer ID is, and you can start to say the people who engage with our brand community on average are worth X times more per year than people who don't engage with our brand community. Even if you can't do that, again, you can turn to surveys and ask people about how much share of wallet you're getting from them, and when they have to buy from your category again, if they intend to buy from you or from someone else. Those are the kinds of questions that can really get you to sort of customer affinity and loyalty and some of the other data.
Thanks, Nate. The next question is something that we hear a lot at Passenger, and if you don't mind, I'll give some of my responses, and then if there's anything you want to add, Nate, I would love to hear it. So the question is, how do you measure the success of a branded community, and how do you know if it's impacting the bottom line? And for us, there's many ways to measure that, and when I think about it, I can give some concrete examples for each of those three main areas that we talked about: discovery, innovation, and advocacy. So for the discovery space, I mean, first of all, for all of them, it's all about developing your own personal ROI. So what is it that you want to measure it by? What ultimately is the brand looking to achieve through having a community? In the discovery space, when they're primarily focused on research, a lot of our clients will do a direct cost comparison. So they'll take all the projects that they did in a community and they will cost them out of what it would have cost them had they done traditional research methods outside of the community. The value, as you can imagine, is immense because they can do more projects and they can get those results faster through a community. But that's one of the main ways that they'll prove value when they're going back to their key stakeholders and managers. When it comes to innovation, it is really about the products and services that are manifested as a part of that co-creation with customers. So were they able to release new things to the market? Did it help them decide between A or B if there was some internal debate? And then what was the impact once that service got released or that product was sent out to market? And then that's how they can associate value. For advocacy and sales and loyalty, we actually had a customer recently who tracked community behavior in their stores. So we identified who the members were. We were able to attach it to what their spend was like with the brand, and we're able to show in this particular community that they had a spend lift of about 45% as a result of being in the community and participating, which translated to lots and lots of dollars for the company. So all of those are some just examples of ways that we have helped clients measure the success of their community. As I've mentioned, we certainly will cater that success to what they're trying to achieve, but those are primarily our main ways when we look at the 3 areas of focus. Nate, anything that you wanted to add to that, or do you want me to jump to the next one?
No, I think you did a great job and gave some great examples. And what I'll say is the common theme there is money, right? And it's either, listen, you got to show the bosses you either made them money or you saved them money. If you can show one or the other, you get budget again next time. If you can't, maybe you don't.
Yes, yes. At the end of the day, it's never that complicated, right? It's about money. We're getting a lot of questions that are coming in that are pretty tactical about, some ways to incentivize in communities and getting started on a trial. So for all of you that have some of those really specific questions, what we will do is reach out to you individually afterwards, and we could talk a little bit more about the things that you're thinking about and the factors that you're dealing with, and we can provide some more individualized answers. So the last question I'm going to ask you, Nate, really kind of feels like a manifestation of everything that you've talked about today, and I think will kind of be a nice cherry on top to this webinar that we've done. So the last question is really summarizing, what is the benefit of having a closed online community as opposed to an open community on a social network?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you guys at Passenger, I know you guys tend to think of what happens on Facebook or Twitter as an open community. I won't even use that word for what happens on Facebook or Twitter. There is so rarely actually anything that looks like a community around a brand on those big social networks that it's not, for me, worth calling it a community. Clearly, there's a community of people there who are connecting with each other, but communities very rarely form around brands on these big social networks. It's the brands talking to people and maybe people one by one leaving comments, but even that doesn't happen most of the time. And by the way, when the brands try to talk to people, that doesn't happen most of the time either because, organic reach on Facebook and Twitter is incredibly low, and so engagement's low, and you're not seeing anything that to me looks like a community on those big social networks. If you want to build a community around your brand online, you have to actually build the community yourself. You have to find a technology partner and go and create a destination where people can come and engage with each other and with your company and share and talk and actually have a conversation with each other. For me, that's the value of building a brand community. And when we talk about why these brand communities are driving so much more business value than the big social networks are, we talk about that, that Twitter versus community stat, where the marketers are twice as likely to be on Twitter as to build communities, but marketers themselves admit that communities drive much more business value. Well, for me, that's the heart of it. It's because on Twitter, it's everyone talking at each other and very little conversation and very little community. But when you build a community, you have this chance to actually interact with your audience and for your audience to interact with each other. And that's what we always thought social was going to be. I mean, that's the promise of social. It's been the promise of social for a decade now. And it's something that we're just not seeing on the big social sites, but that we can see when brands build their own communities.
Nate, thank you so much for being here with us today. It really was a pleasure. It was an immense amount of information that we got shared. So, and thank you to Forrester for your partnership. You guys have really been wonderful to work with, and we thank you so much for the time and effort that was put into this today. We hope that everyone enjoyed today's presentation. If you have any follow-up questions, my email is on the slide. You can feel free to reach out to me. As I mentioned, for those of you who had some more specific questions, you can expect to hear from us in the next couple of days, and we can help you try to answer some of those individual questions that you may have. Everyone is going to be sent a recording of this, and if you have gotten really curious about the Passenger platform, you're more than welcome to sign up for a free trial by going to fuelcycle.com, which is listed on the slide, and you can try it firsthand. Thank you again so much, Nate and Forrester, and to everyone else, we hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.